Today's session is entitled How to Make Your Digital Marketing Sustainable. Something that obviously in today's business landscape is absolutely essential, not just for ethical reasons, but also for sustainable reasons. And we believe it's critical to align your digital marketing strategies with your environmental impact. And the importance of raising awareness about digital sustainability is what we're about and what we'll be discussing today. Lots of facts and figures have been bandied around at the moment. Apparently, the carbon footprint of the internet now surpasses that of the airline industry, which is a shocking fact. Anyhow, we've got some fantastic speakers with us today who are going to help us on this journey of discovery. Chris Thornhill, who's ethical marketing champion. He's a co-founder and CEO of Growth Animals. He's a trustee of the Dementia Support and also a mentor. And he's on a mission to clean up marketing and put ethics right at the forefront. He spent the first 15 years of his career launching and growing brands across the globe for high-profile businesses like Auto Trader, Carlsberg, and Goodwood. And he was basically only after he joined the charity Dementia Support as a trustee was he inspired through his experience and the values of the wider community to set up his own agency in this space, which he co-founded with Jen Bayfield, and they set up Growth Animals at the height of the pandemic. And today they're working with a broad range of clients, helping them to grow their businesses in a positive way through marketing that is helpful and inspiring. So welcome, Chris. Thanks for joining us today. David Horn of Keyhorn has spent the last 20 years in web development, and his day-to-day role, he acts as the MD, technical project manager, and responsible for delivering user experience, UX, UI, as well as working with design and development teams. He also teaches on web design and development as a regular guest at the local radio business show. Tom from Futureproof, he's a CEO. Futureproof helps businesses manage, improve, and publish their sustainability from achieving certifications like B Corp to reducing their carbon emissions to net zero and reporting on ECG or even ESG. Dyslexia strikes again. And then Liz Mayers is the co-founder and director of ARE Consultants. She's passionate about equality and proud to be the co-founder of ARE Consultants, a consultancy and training firm that provides genuine solutions for organizations committed to improving equality, diversity, and inclusion. She's also the co-founder of an exciting new EDI accreditation scheme that's being launched in the coming weeks, and they're helping organizations prove and improve their commitment. Having spent many years helping organizations create diverse and inclusive leadership hiring strategies, Liz is excited to be utilizing that experience to improve the workplace for all. So we have an august and wonderful panel today. I'm looking forward to all of their contributions. I'm just going to bring them into the limelight and ask them to join me, and we will get going. And by the way, please make this as interactive as possible. We really want to get your questions. There's a good opportunity here for you all to be asking from people who know all about this subject. Got everyone there now. Thank you very much indeed. Okay, I'm going to dip out and ask questions from afar, if I may. But thanks for joining us. It's good to have you here, and I'm glad we're doing this call in a sustainable way. We were talking in the seconds before the call about the fact that increasingly people are using video, using Zoom and other platforms to make one-to-one calls. And actually, in truth, if you pick up the old telephone, if you still use this as a phone, it's a lot greener way to communicate than actually using video, because it uses obviously a lot less bandwidth. But anyway, be that as it may, I want to start basically by asking Liz, if you don't mind, to help define what you mean by digital sustainability, because there's a big old world, and I'd just like to understand from your point of view, what is digital sustainability?
Yeah, thank you, Stephen. If I'm being totally honest, when we were looking at relaunching our business, we weren't really thinking about sustainability. That's possibly not the opening you were expecting from me. But we were introduced to Growth Animals, and in my mind, I hadn't considered our carbon footprint. For me, that was obvious polluters like airlines, manufacturing companies, And we have a hybrid work model, so work from home quite a lot of the time. We're not doing unnecessary commutes, don't have big flashy offices, use public transport to get to client meetings. So thought we were sort of being pretty good. But realized in talking to Chris, ethically and morally, we are trying to improve the world of work for people and improve the workplace. And it very quickly became clear to me that actually, ethically, morally, we had to sustain the world as well as the world of work if we were going to be true to our purpose. So I feel like I'm very new on this journey. I'm learning an awful lot as we go. And certainly wouldn't put myself out there as an expert, but being made aware of the electronic communications and how those are used and the impact that has on our footprint has been a really interesting journey for me as well.
Thank you. Chris, same question to you, if I may. How do you define this broad term?
Yeah, so I think the thing that really captured our attention and made us sort of dive into this area was some of those big hairy facts, like you mentioned, the fact that the internet is polluting as much as the airline industry, that it's exceeding the carbon footprint of the UK as a general. You know, those are really surprising facts when we first learned them. And I think the fact that a lot of people aren't aware of that and have been going down, a lot of businesses have been going down a journey to become more sustainable, looking at a lot of the right things like their supply chain, for example, going paperless as a business. But in that process, they've been throwing a lot of things digitally without really considering the impact that might have. So it really is everything digital. So we look a lot at websites and what we can improve on that. But, you know, as you mentioned before, it's making decisions like, do I have a phone call instead of a Zoom call? What am I doing with my email? Do I need to reply thank you to everyone? Do I need to store all of my old emails or do I delete them? It actually becomes quite a big beast around how you interact in your digital world and try to make it as clean as possible.
Tom, same question to you, mate.
Sure. So I think the way we kind of phrase it is it's how your business kind of ensures that from a technical practice that you're doing everything in the most environmentally friendly way. So I think in technology and in digital, you can kind of look at it like a stack of kind of all the way from the bottom of the stack to the top of the technology stack. So that means from the software and the hardware, from the servers all the way through to how people use devices, all of these different elements, all of the carbon that comes out of activity, that is the element of digital sustainability, and it's how businesses can improve in what they're doing in that space, essentially. That's probably a bit more of a technical definition of it, but yeah.
Thank you, that's really helpful. David, a slightly different question to you. I mean, I know that you've been building sustainable websites for clients for a few years now, and you actually measure that impact. How do you go about assessing a client's portfolio in the digital space to understand exactly what impact they're currently having in order to be able to actually reduce it?
Google doesn't really measure how sustainable a website is, but it does measure how quickly the website loads. So for us, we check if a client has got 6 websites, then we check all of them, see how quickly they load, because the faster they load, the less data it's trying to transfer. So that gives us a good benchmark in terms of how big the website is, because a lot of the energy is data being transferred from the server to the end user on their laptop, their desktop. So we look at that to start with, and then we actually look at the content, what they've got in the site, what's old, what's there, massive images, videos, all that kind of thing. So it's a bit of an audit, partially around how quickly the website loads, because actually that's very good for their SEO if it loads quickly, but also partially around how much storage space the website needs just to maintain it, because that's all space on the server that may or may not be needed. So there's kind of a two-prong attack.
And if we start to think a little bit about, thank you very much, David, if we start to think about businesses in terms of the commercial opportunities, because let's be honest, everything, particularly in this economy we're in at the moment, as much as we'd like to believe that actually every business is equally concerned about the environment and equally concerned about sustainability in general. Unfortunately, from an FD's point of view, or from a chief executive's point of view, it starts from really understanding if there's a commercial opportunity here, and actually is there a way to actually reduce their costs. Chris, can I come to you on that question?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's the good thing about this, is that, as David alluded to, speed is really the key here to making sure that websites in particular are as clean as possible. And if you take that philosophy through to the design and development of a website, it makes that website better, because ultimately, if you're making it faster, you're enabling the user to get from A to B on that site as quickly as possible. So that's therefore making them get to that end goal of whether that's converting, inquiring, etc., etc. So actually, the nice thing here is there isn't a trade-off. If you take the principles of clean web design, you're going to get a better website that's going to do what you want it to achieve commercially.
And in terms of kind of measuring the cost benefit, how does one go about that? How do you kind of compare with what was costing them previously and what the impact is now with the changes that you've actually recommended?
Yeah, so you'd normally just do, whatever your key metrics are that you're looking at on a day-to-day basis, you look at how those are with the old website prior to any change, whether that's conversions, inquiries, etc. And then measure that after a period of time of the new website having been in place and see the difference there. And there's obviously some really great free to use carbon calculators out there on the internet as well. So you can get that start point of how dirty your website is at the beginning and get that touch point at the end to see how much cleaner it is as well. So you've got both the sort of commercial change and the environmental change over that period of time.
This one's for anyone. Thank you, Chris. I mean, in terms of who is marking your card, which organizations are putting pressure on businesses to actually take these imperatives and actually take these actions?
If you work for government agencies, they're becoming more and more aware of this. So they tied in with accessibility. So a lot of commercial organizations they're interested, but not very interested, really. But if you work for government agencies, then they're the driving force. It's because they want to see that site's successful and they want to see that you're using best design practice.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I was going to say, and on top of that as well, one thing we see a lot is within pitching and proposals is that businesses are continually asked for what are their credentials in sustainability more generally. And as part of that is, what do you do from a digital standpoint with your sustainability? And it's not common, but it's becoming increasingly a conversation that we hear with companies. So having a kind of stance on what you do, what you don't do, and what your goals are, that's something that we hear quite a lot from the commercial side.
So how do you start? What's the starting point? You know, if clients on this call today and they're thinking about actually ways in which they can actually address this issue, what's your best advice? Where do you suggest they start?
For a website, if you Google Green Web Foundation, they will check your website and tell you how dirty your website is compared to other websites. So,
okay.
and it'll, ideally that you want a green score that says you're cleaner than 90% of other websites. But that's a good starting point in terms of how much of a mountain do I have to climb to get this right.
Fraser, perhaps you could actually put that link, please, into the chat. Otherwise, everyone will be out there trying to find it. And there you are.
I've just put the link in actually. So yeah, the website carbon calculator is the original one, and yeah, gives you a really good read of how dirty or clean your website is.
Okay, so we've established then basically so far then the size of your website and how quickly it loads is a key factor. You know, the amount of content you've got on there, that has an impact because you've got massive servers trying to support all the content on the site. The actual design of the site and the way in which I guess it loads, again, to David's earlier point, is absolutely really important. And then emails in general too. We need to start to think about actually emails, the proliferation of emails. I mean, I have to commit, I get something in the order of about 300 emails a day. It's a lot of stuff. And I'm obviously looking at that content on multiple devices, depending where I am, if I'm in front of my desk like I am now, or if I'm actually on my mobile, etc. And of course, the mobile is talking to the desk is talking to the server, and obviously a lot of stuff is all being backed up somewhere. That's probably not very efficient. Suits my lifestyle, but it's not very efficient. So there's things that I guess that we all personally can do in a way in which we actually store and use content to begin to reduce our carbon footprint. And all of this, I guess, is actually the cost is really in the backing up and the storage. Can we talk a little bit about some of the big storage players like Amazon and so forth? What are they doing to try and actually reduce their impact? Because obviously they are supporting a lot of the websites that we all use. They're all backed up on physical servers, creating lots of heat. What's happening to that heat and so on and so forth? Does anyone have some insights around that?
I mean, there's a fair bit of innovation going on in that area. Microsoft, for example, have recently put a whole bunch of their servers into the sea so that the cooling is being done naturally, effectively. I forget who they were now. There's a smaller business who were trying something even more inventive in that they'd noticed the problem of cooling, but they'd also noticed a problem with their local swimming pool that needed heating. And so they ended up putting the servers effectively in the pool to heat the pool. So it was kind of like a dual solution. So the stuff like that's going on, which is great, but we just need it to happen faster and on a wider scale.
And part of the problem, I guess, is awareness of the issue, isn't it? You know, a lot of people just do not have an awareness and understanding of what the issue is. David, I think you've got a question. I'll bring you in.
Yeah. Teresa sent me a really interesting link to an article in The Guardian. If you just want to put some stats around this, which is really interesting. A new study commissioned by energy company OVO reckons Brits send 64 million unnecessary emails every day. And if we all sent one less thank you email, the impact would be nearly 16,500 tons of carbon a year, 81,152 flights to Madrid, or taking over nearly 3,500 diesel cars off the road. That's if each of us sent one less thank you email a day. That's the sort of impact. So, you know, some interesting stats out there.
Thank you, David. That's a really interesting point. I was just wondering though, Chris, about the idea of actually putting servers into the sea, what the impact was going to have environmentally on fish, whether it would actually increase the population of fish or whether it actually might cause a problem. But I'm sure it's fairly insignificant, the temperatures we're talking about here, but of course every degree helps these days. The other one I have heard quite recently, in fact I had it pitched to me a few weeks ago, which I thought was a really neat idea, was the distribution of servers and actually putting them into people's homes. So actually large organizations that actually are in the server business put servers into people's airing cupboards, yeah, or somewhere in the home to actually use that ambient heat to actually help heat their homes. So at no cost to the individual, they get basically a heater put into their property. I don't know again how practical that is, but I thought the basic idea was the sound one. In terms of legislation, and they will be coming down from government in this area. I mean, obviously there's lots of consumer pressure. You've got NGOs that we see on a daily basis talking about sustainability more broadly, and whether it's banning oil, banning fracking, whatever it happens to be. There's a lot of activity at the moment, both here in the UK and across the continent. But equally too, from a legislation point of view, are you aware of any legislation that's coming down the line that may well actually impact businesses that they should be aware of? Again, anyone?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things happening. Not a lot actually in the UK, but quite a bit in the EU and across Europe. So France is doing a couple of things around, for businesses, they're promoting that you have to go to a energy efficient green server before anyone else. So they're kind of actually promoting that. They're promoting more training. There is one thing which is happening which will affect UK businesses, which is called the CSRD. And essentially it's a big report that big businesses will need to report on in their sustainability. And if you sell any business or you work with any clients in the EU, then you would need to be reporting your carbon footprint as part of that. So that's already in play now for large companies. And then what they're doing is they're pushing it down. So they're saying in 3 years' time, they'll begin to be incorporating smaller businesses in. Those size of businesses are still to be defined. But that is essentially on the roadmap for sustainability and for digital sustainability as well.
And obviously, they're right to start with the larger organisations, but equally too, as you rightly say, it'll filter down quite quickly to business. So whilst smaller business may think it gives them a short-term commercial advantage, the reality is that they will be expected to conform. And even though obviously we're no longer part of the European community, I assume that actually, given our commitment to reducing carbon, this is going to be another area that we probably adopt at a UK level in the very near future. So here you are, you're the CMO or CMO or the head of marketing of a brand on this call today. And with everything that's happening in the world at the moment and how business is, how would you pitch this requirement, this activity to the CEO or the financial director of a business? What would be your starting point? Who wants to take this one? Liz, do you want to have a crack at that one and we'll share it amongst the group?
Yeah, again, as I said, Stephen, I feel probably not very qualified to give you all the sort of facts and figures, but for us, it was absolutely an ethical decision for our business. And we were fortunate in as much as starting with almost a blank piece of paper, we were able to do the right things that was aligned to our purpose and our business goals, as well as also knowing that it had then the sustainable and financial benefits that come from setting up and organising well from the get-go. And as I say, fortunately, Chris was on hand to guide me through the type of considerations that we really needed to be thinking of. And actually David as well in planning the website and designing that, and the considerations that I was really oblivious to and hadn't thought about that impact. So I think, yes, if you're fortunate to be starting with a blank piece of paper like we were, then you can put in place best practice right from the get-go. If you already have a legacy site and you're looking at making changes, then you're in the fortunate position of having that comparison. You can see the savings and the financial implications for your business as well.
Chris, thank you. As a build on that, Liz, Chris, how do you pitch what you do then to prospective clients? How do you get them to engage around this subject?
Yeah, we talk about obviously the commercial benefits to it as well, because as you say, in this climate, you need to make a case for that on top of the environmental benefits, and so that's where it becomes important to make the case around how it's not just about making it cleaner, it's making it faster, it's making it better to convert, better to inquire, etc., etc. But the other thing we also discuss is that I think when it comes to websites, there tends to be this natural cycle within a business that they want to reevaluate it or redo it every sort of 3 years or so. And so if they've missed that chance to do a new cycle, there's also a lot of low-hanging fruit that they can even do themselves without much major cost. Like little things like re-evaluating the imagery on their site, shrinking the size of that to what it needs to be rather than what they thought it should be. relooking at the host provider, for example, make sure that's on renewable energies. So there are things that can be done, even if business isn't in the position to invest in a new build right now.
That's just counterintuitive, isn't it, at the moment, because everybody's basically wanting to have very rich media. Video is essential, explainer videos and content in general. And of course, we're focusing at the moment on websites. We've even begun to talk about social media and the use of social media, which we should go on to in a minute. But how can one still have effective communications and still not use video content? And are we saying that, or are we just saying actually load video content in a different way?
Yeah, exactly. So a lot of it is about being smarter. A simple example would be that, I think we've all become used to, you open up a website and the first thing you're greeted with on the homepage is an auto playing video. So that's a classic example of that, something that doesn't need to be there, because on one hand, it's very energy intensive, but also it's becoming more and more intrusive to the actual user. The user's going onto the site usually with a very clear mission in mind, and that auto-playing video is often getting in the way of them getting to where they need to go. So it's making you rethink the design of your website based upon your core user, your core target customer, and helping them get from A to B as quick as possible. And rethinking whether you need that video, whether you need that image even. Is there better use of copy, graphics, for example, that are going to get them to where they need to go faster?
Anyone else point of view on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's harder to design a simple website than it is just to design something. So it does stretch the designer more. But if you've got less video, less images, then they're more impactful. Because you know, if you've got 17 images on the page, then none of them really stand out. Whereas if you're saying, right, I'm going to restrict to 2 images on the page, it forces you to make the most of them. So it can make the design process slightly longer, but you can easily end up with a much better end result because you're having to think about it harder. So from a design perspective, I think it's good because it forces people to think about it more.
Okay, so thanks Dave for that. So moving on from websites per se, and actually kind of looking at your entire digital stack and the way in which you use digital channels to communicate and market your products and brands. Are there some top tips and things that you should be doing and not doing, particularly in the social media space? I'll throw that one to you, Tom.
From a social media standpoint, it's fairly a black box from what I gather. I think it's quite hard to know what kind of ads run better. For example, on using LinkedIn over Facebook ads, for example. I don't know how public they are about it, but maybe someone else knows a bit more about it. I think you can get some insights on it, but yeah, probably to the points where you mentioned, less video animation and just more compressed imagery where possible. But then also going back to the point as well, I think one thing from a website standpoint, which is also forgotten, is some websites just have dead pages, right? I think we always update our websites, we always add new pages, and we hide elements in the website code. And I think from a more technical point, we can reduce down a lot of the work there as well, because that's also sitting there, it's still creating an emission in the background. But yeah, and maybe there's someone else who has more insight on the advertising side with social media.
But I mean, in terms of social media, there's 2 ways to look at it. One is you just post everything. So, this is what I have for breakfast. This is what my cat looks like with a funny hat on, which is, if for your personal social media, is probably okay. For your work one, the people I tend to look at more are those that aren't posting every day and aren't posting everything, but what they do post is of value. So if you were to take a stance where you're saying, I'm not going to try and just get myself in front of people every second of every day by posting anything, and you just posted stuff of higher value, then people will value what you post more. So you're going to get better traction, and better people are going to look out for it more. And just that alone would reduce the amount of traffic on social media, and that would reduce the amount of storage space, and that would reduce the amount of kind of data being transferred around. So that in and of itself would actually make it the social media a greener place to be. It's just the sheer volume of posts and viewers, etc. And from a business perspective rather than a personal one, just think about, is this post of any value? What value am I adding? Because that's going to help your brand as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, and talking of the volume thing, if you factor this up to then, let's say, social media advertising or digital advertising full stop, then applying principles of targeting are going to help you to be less wasteful. So I think this plays more nicely into the hands of smaller or challenger brands who are more inclined to target more aggressively than, say, your big mass brands who, for them, the norm is to do mass marketing, going for top of mind awareness with blanket advertising. They're the people who are going to really struggle to bring down their carbon footprint and not see an impact on their actual, particularly their brand awareness scores, but even their bottom line. So I think, yeah, thinking about the targeting and really focusing on that can help you to bring down your carbon footprint as a brand too.
Yeah, I think those are all extremely well-made points, and I think also the tendency for people to place the same content across multiple channels. So, you know, the old rules were, if you're creating content and you publish it on Facebook, you publish it on Insta, you may adjust it slightly, you publish a form of it on LinkedIn, but it's a bit of an echo chamber. Primarily, unless you're actually supporting that with paid for activity, you are talking in a bit of an echo chamber to the same people across multiple platforms. And you see that repetition a lot. I've no idea on the scale and the size of the content that's hosted and held on social media versus websites, but you've got to believe, given the amount of video content and rich content, that social media probably has a similar carbon footprint, if not more, than global websites. I'd be very interested to get some data on that, because brands like TikTok obviously have come into the market in the last 3 years, 3.5, 4 years in the UK. A lot of traffic obviously is being driven that way at the moment, and that's all video-based content. So you've seen an emergence and a change from where we were with text content on Facebook to Insta on image-based, and now obviously to video-based content. And of course, all three are now all doing the same stuff too. So it's just more. And somewhere that stuff has to be stored and maintained. And of course, the other thing we haven't spoken about, of course, is the whole issue relating to security. So, you know, the security around content acquisition and actually where content is placed, and not just obviously the economic impact that, you know, security has, but equally obviously say the green impact it can also have in depleting the world's resources. Okay, let's change this up a gear. So we've spoken about energy efficiency. We've spoken about we sort of touched on what I call e-waste management, which is basically what you're saying, which is, you know, have a spring clean, deplete yourself of lots of content that's actually not doing anything for your website, that's got 404s, or it's not actually driving viewership. I mean, have a look at what the top 15, 20 pages are on your website and work out which ones are actually people are engaged with and are looking at, and actually look to reduce the stuff that just isn't being viewed, but it's being stored and it's taking up valuable space. The other thing is around kit itself. You know, a lot of us, we buy and we dispose of kit on a regular basis, whether it's the latest iPhone, the latest piece of hardware, what happens. And I know there's a big push now to obviously recycle that kit, and lots of organizations are basically involved in supporting e-waste collection and recycling initiatives. Very often people don't want to actually put themselves at risk because of the whole issue of access to hard drives. So, you know, they go out in the garden and put their computer in a plastic bag and get a hammer out and knock the hell out of it before they dispose of it. But actually, is there a better way? I mean, are there organizations that you or any of you on this call are working with, and including our viewers today, that have got a very good way of disposing of and recycling kit? And I'd be interested in anyone who can give us some help here.
I don't know anywhere that does the disposal, but in a similar vein, that there is a movement towards equipment that's upgradable. Some laptop and phone manufacturers, and I won't mention who, but we all know who they are constantly being criticised because their equipment's not upgradable. So, you know, you can't open them, you can't do anything with them. You know, if you've got a laptop, you can't put more RAM in it, you can't change the hard drive, you know, that kind of thing. So it has built-in redundancy. But there is a movement towards more modularized equipment where you can replace or just upgrade elements. So, for example, you've got Framework are now building a laptop where you choose the modules. So if you want to change the camera, it's a module. If you want to, you know, if something breaks, you can unplug it and you can put a different one in. So it's generally going to create less waste and less kind of e-waste for us to deal with. And in the phone space, you've got Fairphone, which have been around for longer than Framework. And they're against mobile phones, so you can have as good or as bad a mobile phone as you want. And if you want to, they will introduce something new. You can replace that, so the amount of waste is going down because it's just a module that would need to be recycled rather than the whole of the phone, the whole of the object. So that's not quite answering your question, Stephen, but it's kind of moving, looking at in the future. Hopefully, we'll have less.
Yeah,
we have a local supplier who we use to effectively buy in any screens or keyboards or stuff like that we need for our team, and it's all sort of recycled equipment, so it's got that benefit, and it's cheaper than the new stuff as well, so it's kind of win-win. But it's interesting the point you made around security, because to date we haven't bought a recycled laptop yet, because we always want to make sure we're getting those clean and making sure there's no sort of data or security issues with that. But I'm sure if we had a good chat with them, they'll be able to explain to us that they've managed to find a way to clean those as well.
Yeah, well, I think we've discovered a new business opportunity, because I think actually being able to actually drop off with confidence and have your computers completely and utterly clean, and then have those computers made available to schools, colleges, NGOs, etc., and the sure knowledge actually that none of your data is going to be on there, there's got to be a way forward. Of course, the phones that you send back to Apple, the phones you send back to Nokia, essentially end up in land waste. They don't actually. Nokia's a few years ago, but other brands, it ends up in landfill. It doesn't actually get recycled, cleaned, and actually reused, even though they buy them back off you and give you a discount against a new product.
We get all our IT equipment cleaned, and the hard drives cleaned properly, and everything reformatted by our IT company, and then we donate it all to local community groups, because all of the equipment's still perfectly usable. It's just not good enough for what we're doing. But if you're just surfing the internet, then it's all perfectly fine. So we try and keep it. We try and prevent it from becoming obsolete, which is actually when it just becomes a door opener, and they're quite expensive door openers. So we do try to keep stuff in the system and not kind of just sitting in the corner somewhere gathering dust.
It's fair to say that the whole area of digital sustainability also encompasses, I guess, responsible and encouraging responsible user behaviour. It always fascinates me when you go into town at night, or you go, as I do on occasions, over to Reading, for example. What you will see is a lot of those large organisations are still fully lit at night. They're not utilising power saving settings always. People leave their laptops on. And there's almost a fear actually of actually turning your laptop off, because when you turn it back on again, Windows will go through some dreadful update, and you'll spend the next 5 days trying to figure out how to use the new update, or it'll probably impact upon your usage and give you further problems. So how do we change that mindset? How do we get both businesses and individuals to start to actually say, well, I'm going to turn off my computers at night. I'm actually going to switch off those lights. I'm not going to fully light, as a large energy company in Reading did for a lot of their time in their new offices. Literally at night, it was like a Christmas tree. How do we put pressure on organisations, or give best advice? I guess the pressure can come later, but best advice in the first instance.
Personally, I would have thought the current price of electricity should be doing that for us. Yeah, but perhaps not.
Well, you would hope so. I mean, and I also wondered whether it's varied and changed since COVID, whether with obviously people working different different times of the week now, with a lot of organizations, people were predominantly focusing on coming into the office on a Tuesday, Wednesday and Thursday. Has technology caught up with that fact insofar as is it closing down and creating dark areas on a Monday and a Friday, so that actually when people are in, it's well lit and everything's available, but outside of those times, banks or computers are closed down or whatever. I don't know whether, again, there's an opportunity there to actually advise businesses on actually things they can be doing, because it's like all these things. You know, if we all individually take steps, then obviously the impact can be significant. If we rely upon business and we rely upon government, A, it's never going to happen, and B, it'll only happen when it actually becomes cost effective to do so, or they legislate against it. I'd be really interested in anyone's experiences on this call, if they're able to kind of raise their hand, if they'd like to ask some questions around things that they've done in their businesses that actually enable their businesses to be more efficient, more effective, and more sustainable. And that could be, you know, as simple as, you know, cutting out all car journeys. It could be as simple as adopting different processes. It could be, you know, you've actually done your own audit of your digital footprint and you've actually made physical changes. Anyone? Are we here to give advice today? I'm always interested in people's thoughts there. So I can't quite see it on the screen. It could well be you're raising your hand and I can't see you. Okay, well, if there are no questions relating to, or any examples of actually what people have done, let's go on to talk a little bit about other areas, and also, I guess, concerns about people using the changes they make in this space to be marketing opportunities, and actually the impact that then has on greenwashing. And I'd just be more broadly interested in actually, if you do take action in this space, if you do look to reduce your carbon footprint, if you start to crow and talk about it, will this have an impact on how you are perceived as a brand, both positively or negatively? Have you got examples to our panel? David, Tom.
I mean, yeah, I guess we see it a lot, but probably the nature of like who we work with. But people who come to us are typically the ones that are asked, we need to show that we do something in this space, because we're getting asked, we're getting pressured by our supplier, or you know, our competitors doing it for whatever reason. So one thing that is increasingly used is just an element to say, okay, like, what's our carbon footprint, and just create a very, very mini report, and then be able to talk through, okay, this is our footprint from digital, this is our footprint from employees. And that, going back to your other point, equally works really well with helping reduce down, because I think when employees see a number of like, okay, this is our footprint, that really helps them then go, okay, now I understand why I'm being asked to turn off the lights or being asked to turn off my laptop. So it tends to just be more of an education piece, both for internally and externally, we'd say.
Okay, and obviously in the B Corp process, you know, how much is this part of the process? Chris, you've been through B Corp. I know, Tom, you help businesses go through B Corp. How central is this whole area to a successful certification?
Currently, I would say it's not. Obviously, there's a huge chunk of sustainability within the B Corp sector. It's one of the main, I think, 5 pillars. But actually, I don't remember digital sustainability being particularly featured. There are a couple of questions specific to e-waste and things like that, but certainly nothing related to your website, for example, or email marketing, anything like that.
Yeah, you're right, Chris. Like, in the current version, it's actually, you know, you could be a B Corp and not measure your footprint, which is not great. So they're basically updating it, and they're going to release a new version, I think, in a year and a half time. And that will basically mean that businesses will need to measure their 3 scopes. So without getting too scientific about it, you've got like 3 different scopes of carbon. And in your scope 3, which is roughly like 90% of your footprint, that's where digital sits. So for anyone to be a B Corp in a year and a half time, or to run B Corp, you need to go through that process of measuring your scope 3, which is then measuring your digital. yeah, right now it's a bit of a black box, and I agree with you. It's not the best setup from that side.
Okay, but then it does demonstrate there is an opportunity to take some leadership in this space, and actually that will also, as you rightly say, catch up with you and be core in the future. Other thought I have, obviously, is that one of the key pressures on employees in particular at the moment is mental health and the impact that digital is having on their mental health, which obviously is another incredibly important, perhaps the most important area of sustainability. By encouraging your teams to actually spend less time in front of their PCs and reduce their dependency on email, have you seen or have you witnessed in companies any improvements in mental health?
Well, I mean, I don't stand behind my staff and force them to take breaks, but what we do meetings as stand up, so they're not sitting by their screens. We go into a room that doesn't have computers, so even though we're web developers, we do meetings away from the computers. We try and encourage people to do that, and what I find is the communication is better, because if people are looking at their screen and they're looking at it for a long time, it's actually quite difficult for them to start a conversation, because they might not have actually spoken to anyone for a few hours. So it's actually quite difficult. So without actually stopping them from working, if we encourage them to take these breaks, which help their eyes as well and kind of help them to relax, communication does flow, and so communication is better. Obviously, if everyone's working out of the office, it's quite difficult, because all communication is actually through the screen. So there is a trade-off there between those two things.
Thank you. Liz, I mean, does this kind of fall into your domain in terms of accreditation, in terms of the mental health aspects of the work you're doing?
Yes, we, within the accreditation, we're looking at equality, diversity and inclusion. So it is the way an organisation treats its people, basically, who is represented, how they are evolved and developed within the organisation, but also the environment they're working in. So we do consider adaptive workplaces, the mental health, the physical and emotional well-being and safety of an individual. And I think that's a huge part, which again is why we want to lead by example, and being fortunate enough to be that blank piece of paper. As founders, we decided very early on that we would have a switch off, that there is no expectation to work outside core hours, but that people are absolutely free to do what fits their personal situation. And I think that's important for all organisations to consider, caring responsibilities, or whether it's mental health or neurodiversity, that gives people different requirements from a working environment. It may not suit you to be online at 7 a.m. and quite often if you get emails pinging through at that time, you feel like, oh, I ought to be switched on, I ought to be doing this. But if you're trying to juggle the school run at the same time, actually that's shown to be really bad for our mental health, to always have that sort of tussle with yourself going on. So yes, as in answer to your original question, we do very much have that in place, so that as a team, we don't feel the responsibility to constantly be connected, that we can have time away from screens, that we can have that downtime, weekends and things as well. I think it's important that we protect time away from, thinking about work where we can.
Kind of, for me, it kind of is culturally led, isn't it? Because it actually starts the organisation, what becomes typical, basically people follow, and it can create, I think, tensions which are unnecessary. here speaks somebody who's not brilliant when it comes to technology boundaries, so I apologise to my team on the call. But it's interesting, in markets like France, for example, they've now legislated against basically calls outside certain periods, and business owners and directors of organisations are actually accountable and responsible if they actually breach those terms and conditions. And not only is there heavy fines, but actually in some cases I think there's been some criminal proceedings where people basically feel they've been hounded, and that's led to poor mental health and so on and so forth. So the latter exists in our law. Obviously, bullying is never acceptable, but equally in France now it's become the norm. You kind of, outside of the 35-hour week or whatever week they're working, you can't use or access or be expected to access or use technology. Okay, listen, I think we probably come to a natural conclusion in our conversations today. I was going to get into the world of AI and how that's going to improve digital sustainability, but I'm going to save that one for another day. I'm conscious, obviously, that people would like to take a break before their next meeting at midday. So I'm going to say thank you to all of you for joining us today's call. Teresa's just going to put up on the screen, if she can, a link to our forthcoming conference. In the autumn, we will be back with a vengeance with Marketing Spice Live, and we'll also have our autumn conference, which is on the 21st September. For those that haven't already booked their ticket, it's something both for clients, brands, and agencies. It's not just an agency session. It was going to be at the Curzon Cinema. We have a world-class lineup of speakers, some amazing speakers on a very diverse range of topics. And you're all welcome to join us, as I say, on the 21st of September, if you follow that link there. This will be one of our physical events, which therefore is not carbon positive. However, we'll be looking to offset the carbon that's generated on that day. And also we have decided to run it just a half-day program, in part to reduce our carbon, but equally to reduce the cost to our members and our friends. So do join us. Thank you once again to Liz, Chris, Tom, and David, and for all of you for taking time with us this morning. Have a carbon-free day and enjoy yourselves, and we'll see you very soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.